Welcome to week 3 of the Cross-Platform Journalism course. This is the week where you'll start to see why you've been building up the presence on the previous social media platforms, and you'll start to gain quite a strong grasp of the current trends in writing for online and for the internet. We should be here for about an hour looking at these slides, watching this movie, and then you may be about another hour doing follow-on work from that. So let's get going then, shall we? Now, while some things have changed, one thing that is essentially still core to this is that people are still people. People want to read good, interesting content. They don't want to have their time wasted. They want to get straight to the point. And the one beauty of online is that if they have time or the inclination, you can provide them with links to go and read more right away. They don't need to go and hunt out other papers or other material. You can give them it all. So people still want news and they still want information. But the big change now is that everyone gets their news or their information through here. They get it through Google, and that's not necessarily if they use Google News or if you get even your news from an RSS feeder like we've discussed in the past. If someone says to you, I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal, I saw an article in the Herald, I saw an article in the Sun, people normally go looking for it via Google. Some will go direct to a newspaper website, others will go straight through Google, especially if they've just been told more generically, I saw something interesting online you might like. So this is how people find their information now, and this ties into what we're going to be talking about today. Now, the fact that you can provide all extra information past a story to someone means you're no longer just the creator of a story, you're also the curator, and the terms are fairly well defined there. You create the story, you either find the information or receive the information and pull it together in a package. And as a curator, you provide links to further reading, to original sources, to background material. And what this means as well is that you no longer have to waste time in a story spending a few paragraphs bringing people up to speed. If, for example, as we'll talk about a few times today, we're talking about an MP resigning, if an MP has been involved in a scandal, all you have to say is MP resigns due to previous scandal, and you can link to the previous scandal. You don't have to spend paragraph upon paragraph stating what it is. And when you are pulling in supplemental material, think as well, is there text, is there pictures, is there video, is there audio? What can make a person stay with your story the longest? Because at the end of the day, that's what you want. Now, there's a third role to this. Content and curation, creating content and curation are the easier two parts, but there's also an element to SEO, which is search engine optimization, which is how people tweak what appears on a website so that it's easier to find by the likes of Google, Bing, Yahoo, and all the other search engines out there. And we'll touch upon it in a couple of parts today. We won't get heavily into it, but we will touch on it in enough of a fashion. Now, writing for online follows most of the basic rules of good offline writing. You have to be accurate, you have to be insightful, you have to be informative and entertaining, both if you can be. The beauty of online is that you also have the benefit of speed. You're not waiting for a 6 o'clock news show, you're not waiting for an on-the-hour radio show, you're not waiting for the next day, the next week or the next month's print deadlines. You're just able to go straight for it and get it out online right away. And the obvious starting point for most people there is the poem from Kipling and Six Honest Men. And if you don't know it, or if you're looking for a wee bit more information on who, what, when, why, how, where, then go and have a look at that link at the bottom of this page. But this won't come as a surprise to you. The traditional news model has always been that of the inverted pyramid. The most newsworthy information at the top, your introduction, then more details, and then as the story went on, other information, other quotes, which to an extent padded out the story, but the most important news was up at the top. And now while there is also formats like the hourglass model of writing and delayed drops and so on for feature writing, the inverted news pyramid is where most people get their news training from. But nowadays, people are wanting their news in different formats, And in part that's because of shorter attention spans, but also because of how people are consuming news. If people are consuming news on a smaller screen, they will still want the story, but they don't want fluff, they don't want clutter, and if they're having to download it on perhaps an expensive 3G plan, they may not have free Wi-Fi, they want it quick, tight and succinct. So, nowadays you can see stories that have a headline, an intro, main details and a quote, and perhaps a link to more at, more can be read at this link. For those who remember CFAX and other platforms like teletext, it's a very similar thing. Journalists there were trained to have a headline and 3 paragraphs, and that was it. That's all they had to sum a story up. Similarly, if you write nibs in any popular newspaper, the little bits down the side of the sides, then you can sometimes only have 55 words to tell a whole story. So brevity is very, very important. Now there has been a change online that recently you can have also, instead of even just having a couple of paragraphs, you have your headline and then the whole story is told in bullet points, and we'll look at an example of this later. But the truth is that things have very, very much changed. In days gone by, you would have had a huge amount of text, and absolute screeds, long, some would say info dumps, others would say fantastically crafted paragraphs. And that used to be the style, but nowadays things are a lot shorter, and it's one thing to debate whether it's better or for worse, but the truth of the fact is that most papers now are a lot shorter in terms of the amount of text that's just thrown at you in one go. There's better use of white space, there's more use of subheads, it's all broken down a lot more. As you can even see from here, that's a Daily Mirror front page from the 1950s compared with a front page from 2013. And regardless of the publication you look at, they've all done the same. There's more pictures, there's more visuals, there's less stories, and there's most certainly less content. If you give someone a Daily Mirror from the 1950s, it would be a struggle for some of them to read all of that information. Whereas if you look at the Daily Mirror from today or from recently, then it's summed up a lot more. So something to bear in mind is that regardless of how you feel about it yourself, stories are being presented in shorter and quicker fashions. But have we taken this too far? As I stated, it's one thing for sentences of 30 or so words. That's fine. You can do that in a tabloid, you can do that in a broadsheet, website, even in a book. But we're seeing it chopped again. I've already mentioned this idea of stories being told in a list. And you see many an example online with things like 10 ways to boost your copy, followed by 10 bullet points that end with a question to boost engagement so you feel you're interacting with the article. Is this the way things are going to go? Is that a step too far? There's only one way to find out. And here's one example of how you can perhaps mix both of them. There's content there in terms of paragraphs that you'd recognise, and then there's a breakdown of bullet points. A numbered list here, but the emphasis is on the same sort of thing. But if you're wanting to be found online, what should you do? If you're doing this to catch Google's attention, what's the best thing to think of? Well, in all honesty, while we will talk today a lot about SEO and offer some advice along those lines, always bear in mind that you should write for human beings and include yourself in that. If you look at a paragraph or if you look at a story online and it seems too bulky or if the paragraphs need broken up a bit more, go and change it. You're as good a judge as anyone of your own material, if not more so, because you've been professionally trained. But at the moment, the trends on Google are that something between 500 to 2,000 words are popular. Google sees that this isn't spam, that it's dense content, that it's very good, that this is the sort of thing that people will be looking for. And if you're looking for examples of material straying towards near the 2,000 word and up count, have a look at the hashtag long reads on Twitter and you'll see some great examples there. But you also have to bear in mind that if someone's accessing your site or your blog on a mobile, they may not want to read 2,000 words. They may, but similarly they may not. It depends on where your users are coming from, what they're expecting, and what you've led them to expect. So what might be a good idea is to consider having a variety of content. Not necessarily all in one story. If you can, fantastic, but over days, have a long story, a short story, a list type story, a story or a picture, a video, some audio. These things stand you in good stead. A good healthy variety of content means you've got more chance of pulling in more viewers and readers to your site. At the moment as well, the trend is towards having headlines of around 60 characters and a summary of around 160 characters, which approximately 55 words. And this is also very useful for when you're spreading your story about. A headline of 60 characters will fit easily into a Facebook or a Twitter or other platform update. So keep that in mind. And again, just a couple of more quick tips. Everyone writes passively. Well, most write in a passive sense. If you can use active verbs instead, it can make a story or copy seem more racing, more racy, more enjoyable, more fast, give it more of a life, but it can be a challenge, but it's just something to bear in mind when you can do that. And I think to an extent, this is why people like platforms like Cover It Live for writing events as they happen, because there's more often more active verbiage used. Again, use subheadings, just this idea of breaking text up so that people can get a good grasp of what you're doing, read it easily and understand it easily. Now, let's start getting to the nitty-gritty here. And we're going to work on the, I think, absolutely fair assumption that everyone knows how to write some form of a news story. Even if you've only grasped the basics of the news pyramid, the inverted news pyramid, you should have an idea what's going on here. But if you're writing a story for the web, you write it as usual. You have your paragraphs, you have your intro, your quotes. If it's a balanced piece, both sides, that's absolutely fine. That's what you do. Now, what you do to take it to the next level for online is that you include links to information provided in the story. So if someone cites a report, include a link to the report. If you've taken a one paragraph quote from a longer press release, include a link to the press release. If there's a video or piece of audio or pictures that you can link to them. Can you embed the video or audio? And we'll show you how to in a moment. But the idea being that you don't just prevent straightforward text where you can't click on anything or do anything. And always try and bear in mind how people read things. So as it says there, the minister said in his press release. Now his press release is in blue, so that tells you that that's a link to another website. And the assumption most people would make from that being in blue is that, well, right, this is going to take me to the full copy of his press release. Fantastic. I wish to read more. Off I'll go. Similarly, if you had a press release or a couple of press releases, you can include the full text at the end of your story. Many a technology website does this. I took this from Engadget, and as you'll see, they've got a straightforward bit of story there, loaded up with all the jargon for SEO purposes. But if they want the full PR text, you can also click show full PR text, and it will show you the full release. And again, that means people who are only having a passing interest can have a look and see it, go, okay, I've read it, I've learned enough. For those who are keen and go, oh, I really fancy that, they can go into further detail and everyone's a winner. Now, how do you link code? Now, it's not hard. Link to other sites. It's not hard at all. The coding side of it is there at the top. The part in blue is the actual link that you would be sending someone to, while the part in red is what you would see on the screen. So there, that's taking you to a website called w3skills.com, but what you would see on the screen is visit W3 Skills. And that's the same as we mentioned just a minute ago with his press release. That's what you would put in there with a link to the press release at the start. Now, if you're using WordPress, as everyone has been encouraged to do, you can very easily do this by clicking on what looks like a little link. And if you look here, you'll see the second stage. What happens is you click on the button, which on WordPress is at the top of the toolbar, which in this case isn't at the top of the screen. Do apologise. If you look at where it says Add Media, and you've got the bold, italics, and then the bullet points and numbers for your lists and the quotation marks, and then formatting for text. Right at the very end, after the 3 formatting text icons, you'll see one that looks like a little chain, and if you click on that, this is what comes up, giving you the option for what you want to put in. You know, what website do you want to go to, and what title do you want to give it. Now, we'll mention titles again and show an example in a second, but title is the text that appears when you hover your mouse over the linked text. And then you've got an option for open link in a new window or tab. This is entirely up to you what you do here. As a matter of preference, I always like to have it open in a new tab so that people have got all the windows that they've been looking at of my content. Pardon me. Others think that it's best practice that if you're opening another link on your website, just have it replace the one that was there. But if you're linking to a new website, then open in a new window. There's no hard and fast set rules on it. It may be that if you're creating copy for someone else's website, they have a style guide that they can tell you. But if you're doing it for your own site, you can set up your own rule either way. Now you'll see there, add media, not just the button, but also in yellow next to it. That's exactly what we were just talking about here. That's the title. There, the yellow is the title, and that's the add media option. That's what you get when you hover your mouse button over. But we're also talking about sharing pictures. And again, WordPress makes it incredibly simple and incredibly easy. So if you click add media, then this is what comes up. It's a straightforward window. Sorry, I've got another example of alt tags to show you in a minute, but pardon me. The add media then just gives you another pop-up, and away you go. It's incredibly straightforward. And when you are putting images online, make sure it's properly named. Most computers, whether it even be an iPhone or a proper camera, just give them random file names. Perhaps, you know, avi123.jpg or similarly daft file formats. Give videos and images a proper name so that you can find them. When you get the option, make sure you have a caption and alt text information as well. Now, the alt text is similar to what we were just talking about, the title. It's when your mouse is hovering over an image and something comes up as that image shows there. The more information you can put on, the better. For every story, it helps Google find you. It may not all be relevant to an SEO score, but anything you can do to give people information to find your story is a good thing to consider. And if you're trying to rank high in Google News as a news site, as well as a blog, embed the pictures on your own site. Don't link to elsewhere. And for those of you who want to have your sites ranking in Google News, drop me an email separately from this, and if there's demand, I'll put some supplemental material up. As you say, you click onto add media, and then that's what you get. You get the option to just pick an image and upload it. And you'll see to the right hand side there, the title comes up. You get the option to put in your caption, alt text, and description of what's in the picture. And I would urge you to make sure that you do fill these in and give people as much information as possible. Similarly, you get options for where to put the picture and what size to upload. Now, size is very important because the larger the file, the longer it takes people to download. So always bear in mind that some people may be looking at it on a desktop, but others may be accessing it through a phone on a 3G connection, and they may be paying for each byte of download. So always be considerate to your users, and bear in mind as well that the quicker your site loads, the more favourable Google looks upon it. So if a site loads really quickly, that will always rank better than a site that takes ages to load, and in part the long loading times may be because they've got huge images on site. Video is an absolute breeze to share. This is just grabbed from YouTube, and if you go under any YouTube video, you'll see options for share this video, which gives you a one-line link, or you can embed. And if you cut and paste embed, you just put it into the HTML of your site and off you go. It should embed without a problem. This is basically the heart of any web page, the guts of any web page. As you'll see again, this is in WordPress, and as you can see from the right hand side, you have the option for visual or text. Most people work in visual, as that gives them an idea for how it looks when it will be on a finished web page. If you go in the text option, as we've done here, you see all the web coding. So you can see the link that's been mentioned there. You can see the H2 coding for subheadings and so on. If you were embedding a YouTube video, this is where you would put it. You would put it into the text side of things. So it's just, don't be afraid of this. You shouldn't have to see it that often, but don't be terrified of it. The main thing always to remember is that if you put in one piece of code at the start, then you have to put a slash in at the end of it to close it off. For example there, if you look at charge for verified status, which is 5 lines down, that starts with a H2 and then a strong tag. And then at the end, there's /strong /H2. And that just tells the computer and the website, show this as a subheading and show it in bold, please. But then stop. If there wasn't a /strong and a /H2 at the end, that whole paragraph would appear the size of a subheading and appear in bold, which I'm sure you would agree isn't the most attractive of things to look at. As I've said, remember, search engines like approximately 60 characters for a title, and description text gets around 160 characters. As always, don't feel the need to go straight to the limit there. If you run over a little, you run over. This is just guides for best practice, and keywords, categories and tags are separate issues that we're going to come on to. But first, a quick word about curating. Curating's not hard. If you've written a story where you were given 3 press releases and a video from another site to talk about, you just link them in. You just say more reading at. Similarly, there are tools you can use that will make life a bit easier for you. For example, on the left hand side there, that's Link Within, which is a free WordPress tool which goes around your site and picks up similar stories. This is lifted from a social media and Twitter website, which is why it's provided extra examples of social media and Twitter stories. And the photo is very important as well, because studies have shown people are far more likely to click on something with a visual image as well as words. To the right hand side, it's a similar thing, but that's from the Daily Mail website. And at the end of any Daily Mail story, there is this material. And the idea being is to keep you on the site, is to give you more information that you might find useful, but at the same time, keep you on the site. And that means you can have links, so you can curate links that are directly relevant to the story. We've been mentioning press releases and so on, or related material. So if we were talking about the MP resigning, this hypothetical MP, your suggested extra reading might have been a profile of the MP, other stories involving the MP, the original scandal involving the MP. There's a lot there that you can use that keeps people on your site and reading your material. And I've just mentioned the tool Link Within. If you're on WordPress and you've got it on a self-hosted site, you just go to plugins, put the phrase into the search box, and off you go. It's that easy, and then it gives you the option to install. There's no hard technical knowledge involved in that at all. And if you want, you can do it manually. We've already shown you the code for how to do it. And there it is again, just to give you a reminder, along with an example of how one website does it. This is from the incredibly popular Ain't It Cool movie website. And they have a setup where they talk about a movie a day. And what they've done is, at the end of that, if you've read it and went, oh, enjoyed that review, oh, here's more things by the same reviewer, I'll go and click and have a read. And again, the idea is just to keep building up your audience, keep people interested, keep people reading your material. Now, we've spoken a bit about keywords here, and this is something that many people not from a journalistic background struggle with. For journalists, it should be an absolute breeze. Keywords are the absolute bare bones of your story. Now, there's 2 sets of keywords to bear in mind here. There's keywords for each and every story, and there's keywords for you as a journalist. If you're a specialist journalist, you'll have keywords. If you're a more generic journalist or a more general news journalist, you may have more keywords or not any at all. But for example, if you were a food critic, a restaurant critic journalist, food reviews, restaurant, these would be part of your keywords. If you specialise in a particular kind of food, that would be one of your keywords as well. In terms of per story, an MP resigning would be the MP name, MP resign, MP quits, perhaps a reason for resigning, sex scandal, or expenses shame. These would be the keywords, the words that people would put into Google to find this story. And what you have to do is make sure that these are in the headlines, intro paragraphs, title tags of a page. We'll come back to that. But these are the words that you would put high up in a story, not what you would bury in the last paragraph. And the more keywords you rank well for, the easier it is for people to find you. And it's worth asking yourself at this point, what are your keywords? Do you think you know what your keywords are? And here's two great tools that you can use to do so. Word Tracker gives you a free trial of finding out what your keywords are. And similarly, Google Keywords tool, it's part of Google AdWords, is a phenomenal tool. You can put in a website and it will say, here's what we think the keywords are. It's a fantastic tool to spend some time with. And you may wish to see websites you currently write for, what the keywords are. You may wish to see any sites that you own yourself, what the keywords are. It's always worth checking, because if you think you want to be known, for example, as a health writer, but it turns out that Google sees you more as a computer game writer purely because of what you've put in your website, it gives you an idea that you can refocus and repurpose your content for what's needed. Now, the next step to consider is categories and tags. And this is because, in essence, the internet is full of spreadsheets. It's all a huge, large database, and it likes material to be tagged. And again, it makes it easier to find. It doesn't play a direct relevance, but it does play a small relevance. So when you write a story, just as you would perhaps have written a story for news or for features or for sport and so on in a newspaper, it's similar on a blog. You write a story and then you give it a category. Now, these are categories you create yourself. So if it's your site, it's your categories, and you run with that. You can have categories for news, you can have categories for reviews, it could be categories for topics that you're interested in, it could be anything at all. And if anyone wants a hand with some categories for their site, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Tags are optional after this, but what they are very good at is they help further define the content. And you may be wondering why this is important. Consider it from this point of view. If I come to your website and I see you've written a story about Scotland, I go, well, that's interesting. Scotland's one of our categories, his or hers categories. I'll click on the category and it shows me all the stories you've written about Scotland. So therefore, it's keeping me on your website. I'm reading more of your material. I'm reading more of your stories. So that's a winner. Similarly, if I see you've got a tag about Scotland, Glasgow, I'll click on your Glasgow tag and again see everything that you've written about that. Now, the tags are optional, but define your content. But you should have categories. You can have an undefined category, but again, that is a category in its own. And an example here is, say you wrote carried out an IT blog for Microsoft. Your categories could be the Xbox 360, Surface, which is a new tablet, Zune, Windows, the main things that Microsoft are known for. But then under that, for example, you could have, you're writing about Microsoft. Your category is the Xbox 360. Tags under that could be games, hardware, news, reviews. These would all be separate tags so that at one click I could see everything written about Xbox 360 games, Xbox 360 hardware, and so on. Now, this isn't like a hashtag on Twitter. If you set up tags and people click on it, then what happens is you only see material on your own site. You don't see material from elsewhere like you do when you click on a Twitter hashtag. And if you want to be a bit more in-depth and expert with this, there's a WordPress plugin called Crosslinker, And that's where you can define words so that if it appears in the run of copy, say for example you write Microsoft Xbox 360, then the plugin knows to automatically tag that up so that if someone clicks on it, then they'll see all your stories on that related topic. It can get very technical, but for those of you feeling brave, it's certainly worth a go. And that's the technical side of it. And we'll step aside from that for a moment because too much technical can fry the brain. Something else that needs to be considered in this day and age is getting people to read the story. And we've already spoken about how content is being written in a more tight fashion, it's more concise. Something else that's worth considering is what's known in some circles as linkbait. To most journalists, this isn't nothing new. The phrase is, but the actual act is nothing new at all. And it's the art of making content so compelling that people just must share it and comment on it. They have to share it on Facebook, or they have to share it on LinkedIn or Twitter or elsewhere. And one thing to bear in mind is emotion is what normally drives people to share. You may present a very reasoned article and something that's quite highbrow, and people go, yes, I will share that, and that's fine. People are more likely to engage something that punches their buttons, and this is a sad side effect to an extent of the internet, but people are more likely to share things that they feel negatively about than things they feel positively about. It's far, far easier to get something negative shared than something positive, and that may be worth bearing in mind. And that's not you have to write in a negative way, but something that makes people angry or upset is more likely to be shared than something that makes them feel good. And when you're considering, the ethics behind that, also bear in mind that to an extent, that's always been true of the popular press. Negative news has always sold and been spread far quicker and far wider than good news. So a way to think of this, what topic, when you're writing something, what punches your emotional buttons? Or as some people say, what is an item that you read that you go, I want to punch the author or the person that's the subject of this article. They're so annoying me. Or something that gets you that wound up. And here's an example. And I've gone for a fairly easy emotive one, but let's consider an article where women talk about not having children, whether because they've had children, don't want them, or they've just never decided to have them. Linkbait topics, either direct quotes you could get from people or ways you could share this link, include people who want kids should be locked up. If motherhood is great, why are mums always looking like they want to cry? Children are only good as organ donors, otherwise they're just a drain on life and money. What woman has a life so empty and pitiful she feels she needs children to feel fulfilled? The idea being there, that's something that if a mother reads that, she'll be like, wow, who's saying I'm always upset? Or how dare someone say that about my children? It's pushing buttons, and all good writing does push buttons. It gets you involved, it gets you engaged, and I'm sure at least one of you will have spotted there's a very Daily Mail type slant here. And that's because the Daily Mail are phenomenal at linkbait. If you look back to the articles of Samantha Brick over the last year or so, she in particular pushes a lot of people's buttons in a very negative way, and people share that content and are talking about it, and that's what you want. More ways you can consider things are someone saying I earn £100,000 a year because I had an abortion, or I feel sorry for tired mums stand at bus stops. You don't even necessarily need quotes. You don't need someone to say this stuff. You can have things like why it's okay to pity women who have kids. The path not taken. Would you be happier child free? And again, that's still involving you in the topic, but that's taking it to the next level because that's asking you a question and more or less saying, right, come on, find out. Would you have been happier? And the idea is that linkbait just encourages people. It captures their attention. Goes, what's that? I need to read this, or I need to find out more about it. And most stories can be related to in a linkbait sort of way. And while some of you may be thinking, well, hang on, this is a bit cynical, bear in mind that all writing is about getting people to read it. Many a journalist, when interviewing people, considers what's going to be the headline, what sort of tone what sort of approach do they want? What's the best quotes of a story? Is there something in particular they want to get people to say? Keep these things in mind. And similarly, when you're interviewing someone, see if there is an angle that works well for Linkbait. I'm not saying push them towards it. You obviously want your subjects to be as natural as possible, but consider ways that you might share something or groups that you might reach out to. A lot of what we've spoken about there in the last 2 pages really probably wouldn't appeal to single men. But if you shared that idea amongst a group of mums or went onto Mumsnet, then you're going to get the group coming after it. They're going to be reading it and commenting. And like all things, people will get more and more savvy to the idea of Linkbait. But at the same time, there will always be people who not fall for it, but who bite, who their attention is caught by it. Now, with that out the road, and again, it actually plays into this because the more people share your article, especially on web pages, the more Google's going to see it being linked to. And the more Google sees links, the happier Google is, because that lets Google see that a story is of importance. Google essentially works on one thing and was founded in one thing. The more people link to a page, the more important it is. Therefore, the higher it has to rank in Google searches. And most people now only scroll down to the first 5, 6, 7 answers in Google. They don't go into the second, third or fourth page. So you want to be high up where possible. Now, there are other factors that come into play, like the site you're writing on and reporting from. But in essence, the more people who link to your page, the better. This is how the normal Google screen looks. And this is from a fantastic presentation from Chris Snyder called SEO for Journalists, that if you're interested, I would really encourage you to go and read it. Take about 10-15 minutes, but it's a really good presentation. And your normal Google page, your natural search results are in the green box to the bottom left, and to the top and to the right hand side you have paid results. Now these you can't influence unless you're putting money down, and we've not discussed that here. So if anyone wants to talk advertising, I'm more than happy to give some pointers, but most people go for the green area because that's the honest results, that's the non-advertising results. And how Google works is that it essentially sees certain pieces of information. It sees the title, it sees the URL, and it sees the headlines and the text. It looks at a page very differently, as you've already seen from when we looked at the web code earlier. But from your title, your URL, and your headlines and text there, this is what Google brings back to you. You see the title, URL, and the meta description, which can come from your description or elsewhere. And again, just to stress the fact, this is how Google sees it. It doesn't see it as a fancy web page. It sees it broken down like this. And that's how Google works. That's how all of the web works. And you may be going, well, okay, this could be technical, and it can be, but again, one of the reasons WordPress is such a popular platform is that it makes life a lot easier. For example, there's a plugin called All-in-One SEO Pack, which again is free and would urge you to consider picking up if you can install it onto your WordPress blog. It says to you, give us a title, it says describe the page, and it also asks you for your keywords. And in this case, an article about Twitter, keywords are obviously going to include Twitter. So it prompts you there to put the material in. And if for some reason you have to disable that page being found, or that blog post being found, you just click a box and all your problems are sorted. No need to insert any sort of code tagged with no follow and so on. And that's just reminding you where you find the install plugins options for WordPress. The main basics to keep in your mind though, and it comes back to once you know your keywords, the main basics are make sure that your keyword appears in the HTML title tag of the page. So that, again, that's where Google gets the starting information from. Make sure the keyword is at the top of the page in a bold or a large typeface in a heading of some sort. Use the keyword 2 to 3 times on each article. Now, be very cautious with that, because if you use it too many times, Google penalizes you. And again, it comes back to this idea of, write for human beings. Don't write for a computer, write for human beings. So 2 to 3 times every 100 words is fine. If you've got multiple keywords, two or three times every couple of 100 words is fair play as well. Put the keywords in where they're relevant and useful. Don't just stuff them in. We've already mentioned, have at least 500 words when possible, so Google knows this is an article of quality. Have a picture there, and try and have keywords in your categories and tags if possible. And one last thing to bear in mind is don't duplicate content across pages. Because at some point Google goes, hang on, site A and site B have identical material here, someone's getting punished for it. And there's a tag you can put in that says, no, we're the authoritative site. It's called the canonical tag. And if people want a bit more information on that, I'm more than happy to provide some supplemental material. Otherwise, don't worry too much about it if you don't think it's going to be an issue. And when we say don't duplicate content, obviously it's fine to quote from another page. 20, 30 words. We spoke about press releases earlier as well. Don't take thousands of words and just copy it exactly. That's where you come undone, and that's where you come unstuck with Google. Now let's have a look to an extent at this in action. This is from the Daily Mail from Monday. And as you'll see there, up the top, it's all about the Pope resigning. It's in the title, it's in the URL, it's in the heading, the headline for the story, and then you've got all these bullet points, which in essence gives you the whole story. If you don't have a lot of time, that headline, the headline alone gives you the story, but the bullet points give you a bit more information. And that's before you actually get to what you and I would consider the proper traditional story. Now, when you look at the code for all of that, you'll see I've highlighted the parts in red that are of relevance, and there's description content, keywords content. The channel that's for telling that it's news, that you don't necessarily need to worry about that, but it's just handy to highlight. There's the title, which points out again the story, and you'll see that they've put Mail Online within the title as well, just so that people know where it's come from. And also so that every time Google's indexing it and it sees lots of links to it, goes, that's the Mail. So that if people type Mail Online, they may be looking for the Sunday Mail, they may be looking for the Zimbabwe Mail, but there's a chance the Daily Mail is going to link higher because of this sort of tactic. And there's the canonical link that I was talking about earlier. You'll see that down the bottom. And what they're saying there is, hey, this is our story. It's not came from anywhere else, and we are the publisher of it. So this is our story. And you'll see there's a mention of https:/+.google.com. And we're going to come on to that in a little minute. But for all points of view, when Google looks at that, it goes, okay, this story is from the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail has pulled this together. It's the Daily Mail's. If I see it anywhere else, it's a rip-off of the Daily Mail, and I will punish accordingly. So, how can you get that sort of ability for yourself? Well, Google has brought something in called Google Author Rank. And what it means is that if you look for something online, if someone's got a Google Author Rank, just as the Daily Mail there has a publisher rank, you get a little piece of information. You get an extra piece of information. You get a little picture. And people have been shown to be more likely to click on the material that has a picture because it shows a face, and it also gives you a chance to connect better with an author. And it's very, very straightforward to do. You set up an account with Google, and yes, this includes a G+ account, and then go to that link, and all Google will ask you to do in a very straightforward way is put in your email address for any websites that you write for. And the email address needs to be associated with the site, but that's not technical. And there is a more technical way of doing it, which is mentioned there and in the second link, the third bullet point as well. But it's a relatively straightforward exercise. And if anyone is having any problems setting up a Google Author ranking, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and I'll talk you through it on a one-to-one basis. Now, pulling all of this together, plus what we've done in previous weeks, think of a story you've already got, and preferably something in text, because you're going to have to show and share a little bit of it. Please share with us the original online, either share a link or put it up on Moodle, and I'll set up something in the forums for people to put the links into. Share what you think the story's keywords are. Now you can go and use a tracker tool or a keyword tool to find them, or say what you think they are yourself, and ask yourself, if you were putting this onto the web yourself, what title and description would you give it? Could you make it interesting / engaging in under 100 characters? How would you sell that story in such a short spot? And that's so that, if it comes to sharing it on Twitter, you've got it good to go. Could you use the content of others to make it better? Have a look and see, are there any YouTube videos? Are there any other stories online that would be good complementary reading to this? Could you write the whole story in 5 to 10 bullet points? Could you tell the story as an audiobook? If you were to rewrite the story as a personal blog, how would you do it? And similarly, think of 3 ways that you would link to the story to make people click on it, creating the link bait. Now, you don't need to do all of this on the forum. What I would like to see is the original online and people explaining what the keywords, title and description are, with perhaps some links to supplemental material. That alone shows that you've grasped the basics here and how it's working. If you want to show how you would share it in under 100 characters, fantastic. And similarly, you don't need to do the bullet points or the audiobook. Definitely don't do the blog writing, that'd be a bit much, or the link bait. But if you've got the time and you want to show off that you're understanding this, then feel free to put that material there and I'll have a look at it and give you some feedback. Because next week we'll be talking again about how to write for specific platforms, how to get your story, a good Twitter link, a good piece for Facebook, wiki, comment sections and blogs and other platforms. And by then we're going to be start looking at, okay, this is all coming together now for writing a blog, for what makes good material. And so make sure you've read assignment 1 before this time next week. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate